The Wild Beyond the Witchlight is the next D&D 5th edition adventure to be released, and whilst I was looking through some of the new features of the book, I found this: the return of Warduke, Strongheart, Kellik, and other classic Dungeons & Dragons characters. Now, I immediately recognized the name Warduke, but not Strongheart or Kellik, so I decided to do some digging, and what I found is quite interesting. You might recognize Warduke as I did, as he's been displayed in various forms of D&D media, but his origin actually came in the form of an action figure line. Who is Warduke? Well, as described on the Dungeons & Dragons fandom, Warduke is a powerful human warrior and a hierarch of the Horned Society. He sometimes works as a bounty hunter and assassin. He is heartless, cruel, and short-tempered. We also find out that almost all of Warduke's early life is unknown, as is his true identity. One rumor states that he was once firm friends with a noble paladin, remember that for later, and until Warduke's descent into evil, it forced them to become fierce enemies. In my research on Warduke, I discovered his many collectibles. Many collectibles. Some of those being his original action figure, a figure for his nightmare steed, coloring books, a Halloween costume, even a Warduke pencil sharpener, and a shrinky dink? Anyway, as I continued to research Warduke, I began to realize why his name seemed so familiar. He's been featured in quite a lot of D&D media. In fact, he was in episode 5 of the famous Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, and was featured in the 1984 adventure module Quest for the Hearthstone. Warduke was featured on the front cover, and we even get a stat block. This is the Warduke stat block. An evil fighter, chaotic superhero of 8th level. He has a strength of 16 as his highest score and a 9 in intelligence, 59 hit points, and an armor class of 2. Now, I suppose this makes sense due to the lack of armor on his chest, but look at that helmet and that shield. I feel like 2 is just so lackluster for such an epic character, but when you look at some of these older stat blocks in this book, a surprising amount of characters have an armor class of 2. As strange as this is to me, it's somewhat beside the point. So let's move on and talk about Strongheart. Now, remember that old firm friend of Warduke that I mentioned earlier? That is believed to be Strongheart, and aside from that, there's really not much about him to be found online. Much like Warduke, he was originally introduced in an action figure line, and he is said to be D&D's original good guy. He even shares some same visual similarities to Warduke. When comparing them side by side, it essentially looks like the light and dark versions of the same character. Now, something I found very interesting when attempting to research Strongheart was the Strongheart halfling subrace. There's no direct connection between the two, but you can see the correlation in the name, and the description of Strongheart halflings very much aligns with the good nature of Strongheart himself. The Strongheart halfling and Strongheart could be completely unrelated, but I like to think that the subrace may have been named after him. Now, much like Warduke, Strongheart is also found in the adventure Quest for the Hearthstone, and is seen alongside Warduke on the front cover. And once again, this gives us a stat block. When looking at Strongheart's stat block, we can see that he is a lawful 10th level Lord fighter, and he is a good paladin. he has an extremely high charisma score and average constitution, 68 hit points, and, you guessed it, an armor class of 2. When we look at Strongheart, it is very hard to believe that this man has an armor class of 2, but as I mentioned before, there seems to be some sort of running theme with these older character stat blocks, so we will try our hardest to ignore it. Let's take a look at Kellik. You might recognize Kellik as a villain from an episode of the D&D animated series, but much like Strongheart and Warduke, he has an action figure origin. He also appeared alongside Strongheart and Warduke in the quest for the Hearthstone, and was written into the book The Forest of Enchantment, where he aided the evil plans of Warduke, and then later was seen in the Kid Stuff book and recording Attack of the Assassins, where at the bidding of Warduke, Kellik hired the assassin Zarak to slay Strongheart. Now let's take a quick look at episode 4 of the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, Valley of the Unicorns. This episode features Kellik, and we get this awesome fight scene between him and Venger.
Release the spell, Kellik. Of course, Master. The horns are mine. The power is mine. Now you shall call me Master. Indeed.
Due to the fact that Kellik also appears in the quest for the Hearthstone, we get another stat block to take a look at. Let's see what Kellik has to offer. Now, Kellik is a chaotic evil sorcerer at 7th level. We can see that he has relatively good strength and intelligence and quite a low charisma, hit points of 33 and an armor class of, wait for it, 9. How on earth does Warduke have an armor class of 2, Strongheart also 2, and Kellik 9? I love that we got to look at these stat blocks in the quest for Hearthstone, so I wanted to take a look at a little bit more to do with the book. We can see the quest for Hearthstone was written by Michael L. Gray, and it was intended for levels 5 to 10. And as described on the cover of the book, the icy cavern is deathly quiet. Strange light gleams from a frozen pool. Suddenly, a huge reptile thunders from the depths of the pool, sending glistening shards of ice in every direction. Is this your final battle? Well, clearly not, as we can tell by the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Warduke and Strongheart must survive this encounter. The module itself was designed for use with the action figure line and includes the stat blocks for all of the action figures to be used, which is really, really cool. But unfortunately, reviews describe it as a poorly written marketing gimmick to sell action figures. Regardless, I kind of want to run it, especially before The Wild Beyond the Witchlight comes out so that we can witness these characters before seeing them again in a 5th edition light. Now, aside from the adventure itself, of course we get some really great old school D&D art, which you can never go wrong with. But now that we've spoken about Warduke, Strongheart, and Kellik, what does this mean for The Wild Beyond the Witchlight? Well, aside from fun characters making a return, the strange thing that I noticed is these characters are indeed from the Greyhawk setting. Now, for those that don't know, some different D&D settings such as Greyhawk, the Forgotten Realms do share planes. For example, they both share the 9 hells, thus technically allowing you to move from the Forgotten Realms world to Greyhawk via traveling through the 9 hells. It hasn't been explicitly said that Greyhawk shares the same Feywild, though the Greyhawk setting does have a Fey creature type, so we can assume that they may share the same Feywild. It's really interesting to see Greyhawk characters show up in a Forgotten Realms book. We've seen Greyhawk in pre-written modules before, such as Saltmarsh, but I wonder if this is the first time that we would essentially encounter elements of both settings in one book. This could just be a pull some old characters in, yay, they're Forgotten Realms now, but it would be really interesting to see just how much they flesh these characters out, and if they're deeply ingrained in the story, and whether they remain to be from the Greyhawk setting. After doing my research, I'm very excited to encounter these 3 characters in The Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Actually, I would really love some more background for Strongheart. Now, what do you think? Are you going to pick up The Wild Beyond the Witchlight? And do you think including these characters is cool? Or does it sound like a poorly written gimmick, much like the quest for the Hearthstone? Leave a like if you liked the video, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. I will see you all next time. Thank you.